Hey, and welcome. Welcome to episode 13 of the 5-Year Real Estate Career Podcast. Today's topic is having a realtor makes a significant difference in a real estate transaction. In fact, having the right realtor makes all the difference in a real estate transaction. So imagine, if you can, starting a real estate business that in 5 short years pays you abundantly for the rest of your life. I know it sounds like hype, but it's true. Welcome to the 5-Year Career Podcast, a virtual seminar in every episode. In the next 30 minutes, we're going to help you to understand how to do this. So first of all, I want to ask you a question. Did you know that the average person only buys and sells a house a few times in their lifetime? A realtor, on the other hand, navigates the real estate transactions every day. Their expertise can be invaluable in helping you avoid costly mistakes. Number 2, did you know that negotiation is a key skill in the real estate transactions, and a skilled realtor knows how to negotiate on your behalf, whether you're buying or selling, to ensure that you get the best deal? Did you know that the paperwork involved in a real estate transaction can be overwhelming, especially to your clients? And a realtor can help and handle all the tedious paperwork for you, ensuring everything is filed correctly on time to keep the process moving smoothly all the way from start to finish. So stay with us until the end. We'll send you a copy of 105 ways realtors add value to a transaction to share with your buyers. Because remember, value not articulated is value not appreciated. And after all, being appreciated is now what we all want. So today we're going to cover all of this and more. Today we're going to tap into the expertise of our 3 hosts today, whose combined experience is over 100 years. First of all, I'm going to start out here on the screen. You'll see Patrick Butler, Mr. Go Vertical.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back.
Casting a broader net is what he likes to say by working with employers and membership groups has been a key vertical for this go big or go home guy. Now, he's trained literally thousands of agents during his career and is a principal with 1 Point Solutions. Myself, my name is Eric Wilner. I'm the Automatic Landlord, also the name of the book that I wrote and a course that I wrote. I founded America's longest running daily radio show about real estate, which specializes in investors, and we coach investors on cash flowing real estate and how to own real estate profitably and hassle-free. And then the elder statesman of the group, Mr. Skip Wiley, the fanatical marketer. He's a serial entrepreneur, founder of $2 billion companies, Transcontinental Lending Group, and an ERA, a new ERA Realty, now training realtors across the country as we speak. So let's talk about this, guys. We have a list of items that we want to share with everybody. Who wants to start it off?
I'll jump in, Eric. So the first one is expertise and market knowledge. And, you said something early on, Eric, that having a realtor makes all the difference. Having the right realtor makes every bit of the difference. And folks, whether you're brand new to the real estate business or you've been in it forever, like some of us, you can always learn, but there is definitely a fact that experience has a lot of value for a consumer. So if you're a brand new realtor, it doesn't hurt to chat with a mentor and get some assistance on some of these topics, especially if they're complex. But man, that's the market knowledge component. I sell homes where I live when I do direct real estate transactions. And I can tell you, I know more about the community than anybody that ever shows the property. And it makes the difference in making the sale. Now, I can't say that I do the same thing in other areas, but there are ways that we can prepare ourselves if we're going into a market that we're unfamiliar with. And again, that's where expertise can drive your ability to get your head wrapped around the important factors quickly. And that's just second to none and worth every penny.
Yeah, and just the fact that you're there all the time, you live and work in that community, gives you insights, and everybody lives somewhere, right? So by default, you should be an expert where you live, but you may focus on different areas, and again, that extra knowledge, what's going on in the local politics, in the local marketplace, all those things are critical.
Yeah.
Eric, I've got a comment that is very relevant to all the press that's going on in the world today about whether realtors are even going to be needed in the future. And this is kind of a personal philosophy, so let me just say it clearly. No one is going to save us. Part of this presentation today is building a platform for yourself where you become needed by the consumer, because when changes take place, which they are, look, think back through all of our careers, things have changed. I can remember back when I carried around a big book with the MLS listings, and when they switched to technology, I was one of the guys that resisted it. God, this is too awkward. I got to learn all these new things. And then if you go forward, when they changed all the rules in the mortgage industry, where it dramatically changed that business, everybody said, God, I'm going to get out of the business. I hate it. It's changing too much. But the reality is, what we're talking about today is building something that people want to consume from you. I've sold, maybe been involved in maybe 10,000, 20,000 transactions in my life. And 99% of those transactions, people used me because of the expertise I brought to the table. And imagine if you're a first-time home buyer and you're out there trying to buy a piece of real estate and you're trying to do it on your own, and the only person you're dealing with is a listing agent who's designed to protect the seller of that property. He has no fiduciary with you. Or if you're working with a for sale by owner who only has one goal: sell you the property at the highest price. I don't give a damn how bad the property is. That's why this meeting is so important today, because we've got to develop a story, a strong story, so that when the consumers start to get a little confused about the changes in the industry, they realize they need us. We're a critical part of every single transaction. And without us, it could cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars of pain in the purchase of a piece of real estate. So that's my comment. And by the way, no one is going to save us, ever. We have to get prepared for all these what I see as positive changes that are taking place in the way that the industry is going. It reminds me of that movie, Hunger Games. Any of you seen Hunger Games? Where it's survival of the fittest, and we're becoming the fittest on these weekly podcasts.
Yeah. Hey, another thing too, Skip, you talked about saving money, and, real estate sometimes is as viewed by consumers a snapshot, right? It's today's marketplace, today's interest rates, today's home prices, today's condition, today's everything. But a really astute investor or really astute real estate agent understands the long-term effects of markets too. So if you're a buyer and you're working with an agent, it would be nice for that agent to know what the trend lines are in your area. Are home prices peaked out, and therefore, and we'll get to negotiations, is going any higher than that a dangerous move, and maybe you should be counseled accordingly, whether you make the choice to do so or not? Or are prices about to tail off, in which case you can make your negotiation strategies accordingly. So it's beyond just the snapshot. And I think we're going to talk as well about some of the other players that we have, lenders in particular, who can help make smart decisions. And again, that's doesn't happen by accident. An orchestra leader brings these players to the table and helps that consumer make the best possible decision. So it can save thousands, if not tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars over the life of a loan.
And the first word in the first item of our list is expertise, right? Nobody complains about the price of a brain surgeon, for example, right? How many times have people gone, it says, I need the surgery, but I want to work a little bit on the price, okay? Because there's no absence of value. It's today. And that's why, Skip says that no one's going to come save us. The experts don't need to be saved, okay? Right. They're going to be in demand and they're needed. So speaking about experts, let's talk about number two. Number two is strategic negotiation. You see, negotiations are a critical part of the real estate deal, especially since it's the largest transaction most people will do. And a skilled realtor is a skilled negotiator. who can advocate for your needs. Okay. And now think about this as a realtor, right? Now, if anything that's really come out as a positive of this whole national settlement conversation is it is becoming very clear who represents who. Okay. This whole article or this conversation about, commissions are negotiable and they're not set. It hasn't been set in 20 plus years. It's always been negotiable. But what hasn't always been clear is who you're representing. And now, as an expert, this is where strategic negotiation, whether you're aiming to buy at the lowest price or sell at the highest price, this is where the real rubber hits the road. And this is where value becomes more apparent.
No question
Yeah,
about it.
and that negotiation process, not only, it's important to understand that in any negotiation, there's a buyer and a seller. So oftentimes, skilled real estate agents are helping the buyer buy a piece of property at the best possible price. So they're dealing with a seller who is trying to get the top price. And that's why using a real estate agent who's negotiated thousands of times, someone like any one of the three of us that are on this call, we have some skill. You know how to, the best negotiators that I've ever experienced are the best educators, educating the seller, educating the buyer why they need to do something. And that's where we as the real estate community have to continue to improve our skills in the area of negotiation so that buyers in the marketplace opt to use us as opposed to try to do it on their own.
Yep. And the other thing that's important about negotiations that new folks or unskilled folks in the business don't often think about is it's not just price, right? Price is one piece of a negotiation, but there are many factors that can help offset these to create what we always call the win-win, so that everybody walks away feeling like they got something out of the deal that they wanted. So if the seller is stuck on price, we can certainly affect the buyer's net outcome by maybe getting concessions paid to help lower interest rates or repairs made that otherwise would have come out of their pocket. There's many things that we as skilled negotiators can work with. And when we put them all on the table, it's like a jigsaw puzzle, right? And the more pieces we can turn over, the clearer the picture becomes to everybody. And it's hard to argue with that. When we're selling from emotion, or when the seller or the buyer are coming from a point of emotion, very difficult to get that turned around until we can get them thinking more clearly. So it is such a powerful tool, and to not feel as though people are being pressured into making a decision, but actually being educated, to your point, Skip.
Well, there's two big points that you just made that I don't want them to slip by. Number one is that when you have a buyer and a seller, they're both emotional parties, right? And the key to successful negotiating is to not be emotional, right? And not have an emotional tie to this game. And that's why a realtor plays a critical part, because they can be that objective. Let's look at the big picture. What's the goal here, right? For a ready, willing, and able buyer and a ready, willing, and able seller, who usually are adversarial, right? They're, by the nature of the game, the seller wants the highest price, the buyer wants the lowest price. But to your second point, it isn't always about the price, right? In the world that I work most of the time with investors, I always start out by saying, what's more important? Is it price or is it terms? Mm-hmm. Okay, because for some people, time, for example, is the most important part of this transaction. How fast something happens, or how long, I need extra time. That flexibility, or sometimes there's other things that are intangible but very valuable in the thing, and so it depends on understanding both parties. And the other thing, Skip, you and I did one of our workshops. We do these frequent fearless first time workshops, and you might want to ask us a little bit more about it separately. But one of the things that I was saying is that, one of the craziest things, if you really think about it, I hear somebody come back and I said, I made an offer and it wasn't accepted. And I go, and now what? And they go, well, they said no. And I go, well, what do you mean they said no? They obviously would have said yes at full price. So why didn't you come back with a counter offer? And a skilled realtor will not walk away. He won't walk away with a no. he'll walk away. But okay, so if my buyer's offer wasn't sufficient, how close are we? You know, and there's always little ways to bring that gap closer and closer together in some way. So you can walk back and you go back. The other thing that's very interesting, how do you feel, right? Skip, how do you feel if you're the buyer and they accept your first offer? Do you feel excited, or what starts to sink in?
I think
Well,
I paid too
let me
much.
put it in this context. If I'm the buyer and they accept my first offer, my first thought as a buyer is I could have got it for less.
Yeah.
You left money on the table,
I
right?
left money on the table for sure.
So for the first second, you're like going, yay. And then 1 second later, you're going to start saying, but they
Yeah.
said yes right away. So imagine if you coached your buyer, say, listen, we're going to go in, we're going to say your offer, and they're probably going to say no. Okay. And so I'm okay with that. I'm skilled, I'm experienced, I'm ready for it. And I want you to be ready for it also, because how would you feel if they said yes? Are you going to feel, are you going to be happy to walk away and not question the price and let's move on with the process? Or would you rather that they have some pushback so that you know that you paid, you know, you got the best price that you could get? And that's another key point.
Yep.
I got a story to share. Just happened 2 days ago. One of my good friends who actually worked for the mortgage company I owned for many years, his name is Jack Simmons. He lives down in Cape Coral and he wants to buy a house. He's renting now. So we found a house, and I thought immediately after doing all the due diligence on the price that the house was priced to sell very, very quickly. So Jack wanted to offer full price, and I suggested to him, as a good negotiator, to offer a substantially lower amount than what he was prepared to offer. He didn't want to miss the property. He didn't want to lose the property to the marketplace. But I said, Jack, trust me on this. Make an offer of 15,000 less than what the guy's asking. So instead of Jack paying $324,900 for a well-priced property, he bought it for 50%. I think the final sales price was 320. It was 349. So it was $6,000 less. I don't remember the exact amount because I don't have it in front of me. But because we negotiated the transaction, because he got counsel on what to do, he saved $6,000. He would have gladly paid full price, but that's where a real estate agent brings a lot of value to the table because they've seen that type of transaction a lot of times and they're able to coach somebody.
You know, Skip, we keep losing your video, but you really bring up a very powerful point too, because things change too, right? I remember a year or so, 2 years maybe, that offer would have had to have been full price and or
Absolutely.
higher, or he would have lost the property. So here's where the buyer was thinking, I'm afraid of that happening because I heard it happen to a friend of mine 2 years ago. Well,
Right.
times have changed now, and I'm just assuming that's where his head was at. But that's where
And it
Eric,
depends on the area.
to Eric's point, we're in this every single day. So we know we've got our thumb on the pulse. We know what's going on. So you could counsel him accordingly and not have him risk losing that home. So, that's another great example of that as well. The other thing about negotiations too, is I've learned, is sometimes we have to negotiate with our own client first before we negotiate a transaction. Let's come up with a strategy. Let's make sure we know what you want out of this deal, because I'm not just going to go in and we're going to go toe to toe here. We're going to come in with a strategy so that the seller doesn't feel like they're getting knifed in the back, right? We want everybody to feel good about this coming through. And with some logic, back in my early days in real estate, I've had offers thrown in my face by sellers before, saying, I don't want this, and because I just didn't properly prepare them for what they were about to look at, which made it harder to go back and get the deal consummated. But, you learn over time.
The biggest benefit is you help a buyer make a buying decision that is good for the buyer, that satisfies the seller. and that is negotiation.
Yeah.
And Eric, I think you brought up a very important point. Oftentimes, it has nothing to do with the sales price. It is everything to do with putting a package together that all of the real estate agents have more experience in putting that package together than a buyer who is a first-time buyer or even a repeat buyer who buys once every 7 to 10 years.
Yep.
So there's your strategic. Now it's not just negotiation, right? Because anybody at the market can negotiate and barter, but it's that strategic negotiation that's important. Now, time is money as well. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the efficiency, the time-saving efficiency that that the right agent can bring to the table to help you buy the right property at the right price. And the real estate transaction process can be very overwhelming and time consuming. And a realtor can handle the heavy lifting, saving the buyer, the seller, valuable time and stress too. So you can manage the paperwork, coordinate the inspections, coordinate the appraisals, schedule the closings, on the seller side, at the buyer side, and ensure that everything stays on track for a smooth closing. One of the things on our webinars that we do that are very well attended, they come because they want to take the mystery out of the process. Most buyers walk into a real estate transaction with one hand in front, one hand in back, because they don't entirely know what everything is. And that time-saving efficiency, speak to that.
Yeah. I mean, well, first and foremost, there used to be a tool that we use called the MLS. I don't know if you all have heard about it, but it's apparently going away according to the latest news. But, so today the entire universe has access to the internet. And so what seems like it could be a time saver for consumers to go on Realtor.com or Zillow and look at properties does help them gain a little bit of market insight, but it can also add to the complexity because either the information may be outdated, they don't know what it is that they're looking for. So we, as real estate professionals, can help rein all of that into a digestible amount of information that's relevant to them, right? So using our expertise again to bring that piece of the equation to them in a bite-sized chunk that they can consume. When it comes to timing in real estate, sometimes that's all the difference in the world, right? If we don't strategically lay out a transaction or negotiation process, it could kill the deal itself. So there's a lot of ways that time it becomes money for our consumers. And the same is true for the seller as well. Sometimes they are on a deadline and they need to have things done very specifically in order for them to achieve their goals. Otherwise, it could cost them money. So again, that's where us as experts in the industry pay off.
I'll give you a couple of examples of how we really can help people through time savings. Number one, when I working with a buyer, I tell them that their task is to stay on top of the MLS search that I set up for them. But I know humans, they have a wife, they have kids, they have school, they have soccer, and they aren't following that MLS search as often as they should. Because when a hot property comes on the market, how long does it last, guys? If it's a really hot property, how long is that property going to last today? A day, maybe even a few hours if it's really well priced. So one of the things that I do on behalf, and all good realtors do on behalf, is every morning we look at the MLS. And if we see a property that matches up with our consumer, I make the assumption they're not looking at it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I save them time and money by picking up the phone and calling them. That's number one. Number two, over the years, I've learned that time works positively and negatively for the buyer. Here's an example. I know that a property is on the market one day, or I know that a property is on the market for 4 months. Well, I know that that property that's on the market for 4 months for my buyer is a positive advantage for him to know that when we get into the negotiation process. Mm-hmm. So saving people time is related to gathering data that most consumers do not have access to. A lot of the big search engine like Zillow is eliminating a lot of the data that used to be out there. They used to provide how long it's been on the market, recommended price, recommended values, and many of them now are diminishing that information because they want more reliance for you to pick up the phone or to text somebody so that they can get another lead for their database. But it's all about time saving is knowledge, learning more quicker. And I think that's a big part of what a quality realtor provides for his buyers.
Yeah, you
So
nailed
very,
it. I know you and Eric have been doing your first time homebuyer webinars, and that hour would probably take the average first time buyer 12 to 15 hours to figure out on their
Absolutely.
own, reading internet websites and blogs and things that they don't even know whether they're getting good advice or not. So you as a trusted advisor, and Eric as well, which I know you were going to say something, is critical. Eric.
yeah, no, and you know, back to your point, I was just thinking, you know, for the home buyer, it's a valuable resource, right? And that's what I want to talk about next. It's a very valuable because it saves them time. They can go to one place. They can get to know you as the speaker of, you know, the host of these webinars, and they can make a decision. And most likely, you know, if they see that you're presenting well, you're presenting good, valuable, usable information, they can now also not only learn about the home process, but they're going to learn about the broker, the realtor, the advisor, the person that they want to speak with. Now, a little secret amongst us here, okay, amongst the 5-year career people, think about us. Instead of me talking to Mr. Butler, to Mr. Wiley, you know, to the next one at a time, I now have a group. It's one to many. Okay, so I'm also saving time because now I'm speaking one to many and I'm able to ferret out. Now, ultimately, you know, I like clients that have lots of information. Okay, I would rather work with an educated buyer than with a non-educated buyer, right? And that's why, you know, doing a $1 million transaction is oftentimes less work than doing a $100,000 transaction because you're dealing with less sophisticated people. So let's move on to the next thing, you know, talking about saving time is having these resources. And probably one of the biggest problems that we have right now in terms of information is that there's so much information. People have two dilemmas. Number one is what information is reliable, because there's just as much bad, outdated, and bogus information as there is good information. So you need somebody that can tell the difference.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
Number one. And then number two is that what information of the good information. So let's say that 50% of it's bullshit and 50% of it's good. Okay, I'll tell you where the good information is, and I'll provide you with good information, but it'll still be, you know, a boatload of information. Let me learn more about my client, because then I can sort through the good information and say, this is what you need. And realtors have access, first of all, to a network of professionals, right? So instead of you going to Angie's List, the Yellow Pages, or wherever else you're going to go and find out, you know, who my agent is, then I need an inspector. Which one should I have? Listen, I can give you a list of 3, and I'll tell you any one of these 3 are going to do a great job for you because I've used them, I've vetted them, right? Whether it be lenders, contractors, all of the above people that are involved in a transaction. This also can save you time and money, giving you access to, you know, my little black book of my preferred vendors, pre-vetted service providers that ensure that you're going to get what you're supposed to get when you're supposed to get it.
Eric, what you said is critically important. So I'm a realtor and I'm working with a buyer that doesn't know me. And the first challenge with that is gaining trust and confidence. And the easiest way to gain trust and confidence with someone who doesn't know me is to provide a wealth of simplified information so that that person says, hey, Skip knows what he's talking about, and I can rely on him to provide me with what I need to know to be able to make a decision to buy, a decision on what company to use. Because look, all of you know, we all worked in the mortgage business for many years. And there are new mortgage loan officers, and there are people who have been in the business for 10, 12. Who's going to provide the best counsel for a home buyer? Somebody who's brand new? I don't want that person to practice on my clients. I want to get them in the hands of somebody that's skilled. So our job as a real estate agent is to build a team of people that provide the valuable resources that a first-time home buyer or even an experienced buyer needs. And putting that team together of the right people, the right inspector, the right lender, the right title company or attorney is what we need to convey to the buyers that we work with so that they feel comfortable moving forward with the transaction. The worst buyer to work with ever is a person who comes to you. You don't know him, they don't know you, and this is their first purchase, and you have to walk them through each part of that transaction. So our job as realtors is to educate, to make sure that when we refer somebody to one of our clients, we've had experience with them. They'll provide the same quality service that we're going to provide to our clients. Building a team is what I'm talking about. A team of valuable resource providers.
There's a couple of other areas too that we often overlook because it's not in our daily routine, but let's talk about a home seller, for example, that might be facing losing their home. They're in default, pre-foreclosure. They might be going into bankruptcy or in the middle of bankruptcy. That's a whole separate skill set that requires some knowledge. And once again, to the point of this conversation, it may not be me. I may not be the expert on bankruptcy, although I am, but I want to make sure I know somebody that is, though, that I can reach out to. And I know I can pick up the telephone and call my buddy Steve, who's like the Rain Man when it comes to bankruptcy law, even though he's not an attorney. And I can get answers to questions that even I may not know the response to and help guide the consumer. So sellers need that information. Buyers that can't find inventory. Gee, I haven't heard that recently. Have you? How about access to off-market properties that we as investors may have a back or a pocket listing that we know of, or that we know of certain databases? Again, I'll go back to the bankruptcy and pre-foreclosures, that if we know that marketplace, that's a whole separate set of inventory that is invaluable in times when people are finding it challenging to find homes. So, you know, all these things, and when we start adding them up, means that that's what the professional realtor knows how to do. It's incumbent upon us to know how to fill out contracts and not make mistakes and make sure our errors and omissions is up to speed. But the next level is how do we really provide that value that Eric is talking about, where price no longer becomes an issue.
And finally, I think as we start to come in for a landing here, there's another intangible that's very, very important. That's the emotional support. You know, we talked about the high level of emotion involved, you know, especially for first-time home buyers, the fear, it's the mystery, but the excitement at the same time of having your first and your main place. For a seasoned buyer, you know, it's having everything come together on time, in the right way, for the right price, done correctly. So that emotional support, that advocacy that we are, and that, you know, and that's where you become valuable. Buying and selling a home can be a very emotional roller coaster for anybody, even a seasoned investor. A good realtor offers not just professional guidance, but also emotional support, right? That steady hand on the wheel. And that's what you want to become, is you want to become their trusted advisor, there to answer questions, to address the concerns, many times ahead of them becoming a concern. And then at the end, you know, validate. Remember I said, value articulated is value appreciated. And at the end, you want to celebrate, you know, your success as a team, as a realtor, and as a, you know, a buyer's agent, as a seller's agent. And so that emotional support, you know, that intangible, we can't overlook that.
So I'm going to give you a real quick case study. Just closed on a transaction, somebody I've known for a long time. They sold their house in Boca Raton, Florida, which is in Palm Beach County, and they bought a house in Georgia. The house that they bought in Georgia obviously was subject to selling their house in Boca Raton, Florida. And the people that ultimately bought their house in Boca Raton, Florida, were selling their house in Boca Raton, Florida, and it was subject to. So we had 3 subject to transactions going on. My client, the seller, flipped out constantly when something wasn't going correctly. And I'm going to lose my house in Georgia now. And he would get panic stricken and go off the deep end. And of course, I would sit there because I know him well and bring him back down and say, look, there's nothing to be panicky about because this, that, and the other thing. And I could spend 45 minutes on this topic, but all of these pieces that we talked about came into play, and it was important for him not to freak out, because freaking out then causes people to make rash decisions and throw in the towel and all those other colloquialisms that we learn. That's really important as well. And by the way, sometimes we need that shoulder to cry on if something does go really south on a transaction. And that's important too. Not everything goes perfectly in life, and sometimes how we recover from missteps or things that happen beyond our control is also equally important.
And this is 2 topics in one, but a good example, excellent example, by the way, is when the inspection is done. That becomes a real area of tension for both the seller and the buyer, because you go look at a house, it's nice and shiny and beautiful until the inspector gets there. He inspects it. The buyer gets the inspection report, and he sees all these line items in there that the inspector says is a challenge. What do? We counsel, we support, we break it down.
Renegotiate, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I'm sorry, what was that word? Negotiate? Every single time, because the seller's going to say no, the buyer says yes, and what we do is we pick the most important. As a realtor, we're really kind of a marriage counselor to the real estate transaction.
Very true.
We're coaching, guiding, supporting.
You're the coach, the quarterback, the cheerleader. You know, you do the blocking, you do the tackling, you know, you're all wrapped up in one. And by the way, and so on that note, you know, we also, we mentioned the webinars that we do, and we have a do it for you component as well to our program. So you may want to inquire with us down, the information is down below. But you don't need to do all of this yourself if you're at the beginning or you're now intrigued. So if I do all this stuff well, is it true that I can create and complete a real estate career in just 5 years? And the answer is yes. You know, get a hold of us. Remember, we promised you the free report, 105 ways that realtors add value. So as we conclude this, I want to first of all thank our guests, the men in black here of real estate, Mr. Patrick Butler, Mr. Go Vertical. I want to thank Mr. Skip Wiley, the fanatical marketer, and all of you for tuning in. We think that this topic here, I hope it brought a lot of value. Having a realtor, or more importantly, having the right realtor, makes a difference. And I want to thank you so much for all of you listening to the 5-year podcast. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe. Okay, get the notification, rate us, give us an idea what you think, and of course leave a review. Your feedback means the world to us. Share this, tell other people about that, and most of all, stay tuned. We got more exciting content coming up. We got lots of stuff in the hopper. Follow us here on YouTube for behind the scenes updates, and maybe, you know, we've been talking about a couple of our bloopers and some of the some of the less than perfect things that we've done before. So once again, Patrick, thank you. Any parting comments before we wrap it up?
Just if you want to check out the other podcasts that we've done, you can go to our YouTube channel, which is at 5-year career. YouTube at 5-year career. And you can check out all of our podcasts, which we continue to build on every single week. So thank you all. We'll catch you next time. Eric, thank you for moderating as always.
You're very welcome. Skip, any parting words to the wise?
The wisest decision I've ever received from any human being was my first real estate broker. He said, if you want to be successful in real estate, care about people, guide them and coach them. Don't worry about your real estate commission. just be the best at what you do and money will follow you. So join us on our next podcast, folks, because this is all about you. The real estate business has been my life for 38 years. I still love it today. And you will too, if you learn how to be a coach and a guide for the buyers and the sellers that you represent.
Bye,
There
everybody.
you go. So